I didn't want to be a consultant anymore. I want to be an operator. Actually, working in a more developing like country and economy has been so much more fascinating and interesting than working in a mature market. Quickly, I realized that the biggest market in Kenya is not Makutano, right? It's actually Marikiti. You simply cannot just like load up a truck with tomatoes and show up in a market like in Kagio or like Makutano and expect people to buy it.
Why
Because
not?
even though the markets seem informal, there are still rules within those markets.
Welcome to the Nitpicker podcast, where you get to hear interesting stories about interesting people doing interesting things. My name is Carol Musioka, and I'm the Nitpicker. Our first guest today is the CEO and co-founder of a business with altruistic goals that promises to improve the agricultural capacity of the nation and perhaps even the region. She's an avid traveler, having kayaked the frigid waters of Alaska, having swam in the warm waters of Watamu, having visited with the lions in the Masai Mara, and hopped on the shoulders of fellow EDM music fanatics in festivals in Miami. Here to give us an opportunity to get to know her a little better is E. Lee. E, this podcast brings interesting people who are doing interesting things that make for interesting stories, and you are definitely one such person. How about you tell us how you ended up in Kenya, starting from Beijing?
Yeah, thank you so much, Carol. And it's such an honor to be on the podcast with you. So hi, everyone. My name is E, and I'm the CEO and co-founder at Farmworks. I have now been in Kenya actually coming up on my 5th year anniversary because I came, I remember, August in 2019. And what happened is I used to be a management consultant before I came to, run this agriculture company. And I was working for McKinsey and Company, first actually in the US after college. So I started my career in Los Angeles. And then after 1 year, I moved back to China. So I was in Beijing office.
When did you graduate?
I graduated from university in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason actually there is a small side story for leaving the US. So actually the US has an immigration policy whereby if you want to get a work permit in the country, it's a lottery system because there's always more people who want to get permits than I think they're issuing. Yeah. And the lottery system is not based on your grades or where you work. It's pure luck. Yeah. So then I actually did not get my lottery after 1 year. And that is why I was forced to leave the US as a result. Yeah. But looking back, this actually might be one of the best things and luckiest things that happened to me, because otherwise I might still be, in the US doing a more boring job, and I will not be an interesting person on this interesting podcast. So what happened then is, since I didn't get my visa lottery, I had to actually find another office to transfer to, at least temporarily, before they could use another visa to bring me back.
So you were already working with McKinsey by this time. And who's McKinsey?
McKinsey is one of the most well-known management consulting companies in the world, I would say. Actually, it's one of the first company of its kind, where we provide consulting services on business strategy, on business operations, for mostly large corporations around the globe, but sometimes also governments, NGOs, etc.
So you started work, so you graduated 2016, started working for McKinsey, then went to China in what year?
Beginning of 2018.
2018.
So yeah, just 1 year later, what happened is, since I didn't get my visa, I said, okay, then let me just go back to China, which is where I'm from. Certainly I have work permit there. Yes. And then we had a few offices in the greater China region. Yeah. I decided to go to Beijing, which is a capital city.
Is that your home city?
It's not. My hometown is actually next to Shanghai. Okay. So because I've not been to Beijing much, I was like, at least I go to another new city, right? So that's the reason why I decided to go to Beijing. And then what happened there is I really loved the work we were doing in China. A lot of the work was helping multinationals or other companies to enter China or Asia for the first time, which is so much more interesting compared to a lot of the work we were doing in the US, which is helping very established businesses in very mature markets already. So actually, after 1 year and a half in China, they kept putting me in the lottery system. Apparently, you can be in the lottery while you're not in the country, which is why there were so many people in the lottery in the first place. But eventually, I got to the lottery. So So I remember receiving a call from our HR in like McKinsey in the West Coast of the US and said, you can come back now. And I was thinking, wait a minute, do I want to go back? Actually working in a more developing like country and economy has been so much more fascinating and interesting than working in a mature market. So I thought to myself, maybe I don't want to go back.
You had to go home to figure out that it's actually quite cool to work from home.
Exactly. Yeah, initially I was not actually thinking that. So that's why I'm saying it's a lucky thing that I didn't get the lottery. So then I asked the HR and we had a call with the lawyer. I said, can I possibly not use this lottery now? And I just want to stay outside of the US a bit longer. If I want to go back later, can I do that? And I think he said something like, yeah, you have like 2 years or something to activate this lottery. So if you want to stay a bit longer outside, it's very much okay. So then I thought to myself, where else can I go that is very much emerging and exciting? And of course, Africa. So then at this point, this is now 2019 already. I'd been in China for a year and a half. So I was like, well, I don't know anyone in Africa. I've never been to the continent, but I want to go. So then I started basically reaching out to a lot of the partners and senior people at McKinsey I've worked with and said, hi, can any of you put me in touch with anyone on the continent? And then eventually I was very lucky. This is me being very naive at that point. I didn't know the difference really between Lagos and Nairobi, right? Or Joburg and like.
And how old are
Carol.
you by this time?
2019, I would have been 25 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just young, fresh. You're like, you know what? I just want to travel the world and work in a different place.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And so I was very lucky because the Nairobi office happens to be kind of responsive to me and said, yes, we can take you transfer. Actually, it was not as easy. They were definitely considering my application. I remember the office manager asking me, okay, have you been to Africa? I said, no. And he's like, okay, but why do you want to come? And I can explain, like I'm very adventurous. I'm willing to, work in a new environment. I'm eager to learn. And I remember telling him, and this is not a threat, but I said, if you don't allow me to transfer, then I will quit McKinsey. I'll just move there myself and you'll find me anyways. And he was like, oh, very aggressive. Okay, we'll consider. And surely after a month, they wrote to me and said, okay, we will take your transfer into Nairobi office. So there I was, August 2019, I moved to Nairobi.
Wow.
For the first time.
Okay, and how did you find that?
It was so fascinating. First of all, the weather was so much pleasant, right, compared to what I was thinking, because a lot of people who have never been to the continent just think it's hot or something.
Yeah.
And I had lived most of my grown-up years in California because I went to school in Los Angeles. I went to work after there. So everyone was telling me, of course, Southern California, best weather in the world.
Yes.
And then I knew they were wrong. By the time I came to Nairobi, I'm like, these people have not seen the world. Nairobi weather much, much better. It's just so pleasant. It's always a good day. And everyone here is also extremely friendly. So I immediately fell in love with the city.
And were you doing the same work? Helping multinationals come into Kenya or come into the region? Were you doing different work?
Actually, very different work. Yeah, that's a very good question. So when I was in the US and in China, I always served pretty much Fortune 500s, large corporations. And I never really got to work on things that's more public sector or more for the public good. So that was actually one of my motivations to come to the continent, because McKinsey's work across Africa focuses a lot more around international development and public sector development, which I thought would be a nice change for me. So then when I came here, I immediately started actually working with multiple international organizations and also working with the local government, especially after half a year, right? We got into COVID.
Yes.
So then suddenly the world also changed.
So now we're in COVID. It's 2020. You've been here about, 6 months. Yeah. We're getting shut down. So isn't your first instinct, let me go home, let me be with my parents? Did you fight or flight? Did you stay? Did you go? What's going through your mind?
So clearly I stayed. Actually, that was a real option though. I remember just maybe 2 days before Kenya announced the lockdown, a McKinsey office called me and said, now we're allowing all kind of non-local colleagues to fly back to their home country. But this is the last chance. You have to decide today if you want to get on a flight back or not. And then we'll pay for everything. You can go home, right? And I remember thinking about it and saying, no, I don't want to go back. Actually, I'd rather stay here.
Was it the weather?
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, China is also a hotspot for COVID, right? I'm like, you know what? Kenya is great.
I'm okay.
March 2020.
This is okay.
Yeah. And turned out, I think that was the right choice. Of course, the whole world suffered significantly from COVID. But in comparison, I think Kenya had enough, outdoor space. Nairobi had so much already outdoor dining and everything. I think, and we have a very much younger population compared to many other countries. Yeah. So as a result, I think Kenya's situation in COVID was very much like, I consider myself lucky to be in the city during those times. But COVID brought another career opportunity to me, which is to work closely with the government of Kenya on COVID response management. So I was working with one of the local ministries directly with the cabinet secretary and the principal secretary on kind of leading one of the war rooms on responding to COVID. So that gave me really fresh insights into the inner workings of a government ministry, as well as how different departments and everyone was coming together to solve the crisis, because we have many meetings all on Zoom at that point. People are finally learning how to do virtual meetings. But that was new to me because I never really worked with the public sector in the past. At the same time, we also really actively engaged all the big international organizations like the UK government, US, AID, etc., to kind of come together and try to co-create solutions and proposals on funding to support the SMEs, for example, during COVID. So that was all very interesting.
And how long did you do that for before you're like, all right, fine, next step?
So I did that, I think, literally from March to end of the year in 2020. So for most of 2020. And for McKinsey, a lot of our projects actually don't even go for that long. I was used to doing like 2-week projects for due diligences on businesses, or I would do like 8-week maybe strategy planning project, but that kind of almost 9 months project. And we had a phase after phase of doing different response strategies, then rebuilding. That was probably my longest project in my career of like 4-5 years with the consulting company. So that was very, very eye-opening, as I was mentioning. At the same time, I think there was a sense of like, after the freshness of doing interesting new things passed, I also realized that there is a part of me that wanted to do something more. Because working with the government and public sector can be very slow. Everyone have to really deliberate and have many, many meetings to make even one small, change in policy, let alone it takes months, if not years, to actually implement. So I'm actually quite a doer. So whenever I come up with an idea, I'd love to see it being implemented, and then we can learn from it and maybe do better next time. But that's not how government policies and things work. So I think there was, by the end of 2020, I started thinking, maybe I've gotten all of my exposure to private sector, to public sector as a consultant, and it's time for me to move on and try to do something different.
So then what sparked, what was this different thing?
Yeah. So I actually had no idea what it is that I wanted to do.
You just knew you just want to be out.
Yes. Because I feel like my learning curve has started to slow down also. At this point, I was not just kind of a consultant, but I got to take up team leadership. So I can manage a few people on my team. And then I realized that that is really interesting also. And I'm kind of a natural people person. So I really enjoyed leading teams, and we had really good team dynamics. So I think that actually I was a better manager than I was an analyst, for example. So then I'm like, this is my new skill sets and I should use them somehow. And I remember I took it to journaling to think about, what it is that I want to do next. And I remember kind of coming up with 3 things. So number 1 is I didn't want to be a consultant anymore. I want to be an operator. After university, this is the first and only job I've had. So I figured that if I want to pick up something new and a different skill set, I just need to completely leave the same sector and try to, build something from 0 to 1. That's a really important skill set. Number 2 is I also didn't want to be working with any larger organizations be this, Fortune 500s or even large NGOs, because at this point I've served, both sides, of the sector. And I think that I wanted to do something that's much smaller in the infancy stage and just something where changes can happen much faster. Because once you're large, it always gets more bureaucratic and you cannot be as efficient in making a difference. And then thirdly is I remember thinking, I just want to do something that I believe is unarguably good. And this can be very, very subjective because everyone finds meaning in different things. But I remember thinking that I want to be able to wake up every day and not wondering if today is of meaning or not, of purpose. Because I think that's actually one of the most important things for us to seek in life is meaning and purpose. So I want to do something that I just don't have to worry about that. And I know that it's the right thing to do.
So you come up with these three things. So you're journaling and you come up with very, very clear in your mind. I mean, you've done consulting by now for 2 years. So you come up
actually, for almost 5 years.
Because you've done it in the US and then you've come to China
2016
and then you've come
end of
to
2020.
Kenya. All right. So you come up with these three things. You're journaling, boom. You're like, all right, I now have clarity. I'm in a new country. I don't have networks per se in this country. So what next?
Yeah, and I think this is where the God or the universe actually rewards you for having inner clarity. I feel very grateful for having at least thought about it because for me, I'm a person who often goes for, I think, leap of faith rather than very, very like rational thinking. Like I know people who would be like, for my next job, let me make up a whole Excel and then maybe quantify every single metric, salary, location, etc. And then let me just like talk to many, many people and then come up with a decision. I think that is a great approach, but that has never been my approach. So what had happened to me is after I've kind of had this thought of I need to leave and here are the things I'm seeking, I just started telling, a few close friends, mentors, colleagues about my considerations.
Here in Kenya now?
Even globally, actually. Because at that point, I didn't say that I have to stay here.
I see.
Anywhere would have been okay.
That's right.
Also, for that matter, right? COVID just, kind of countries are opening up again. You have mobility again. And McKinsey is also very good in that manner, in that people don't see you wanting to leave as a negative thing. Actually, as a consulting company, we very much encourage the idea of alumni. So if you leave the company, you are treated as if you've graduated from a school, then you become alum, right, of the school. And as an alum, you can still, use services of McKinsey as a consulting company. And actually, you can bring business back. Then maybe one day you can even come back as a consultant. At this point, you have worked elsewhere. So if anything, you become a more experienced consultant. So I think that's one thing I'm very grateful for, is that the moment I feel like I'm going to explore other options, I didn't have to hide it and be like, nobody must know I want to leave. But I actually can openly discuss with, like my seniors and with people, here is my considerations. And generally people are super, super supportive in helping you find your passion. So what had happened then is one person I've gone to with my considerations was the person I was directly reporting into. So his name is Amit.
Was he be here in Kenya?
Yes. So he is a Kenyan partner in the McKinsey Nairobi office.
Yeah.
And today Amit actually runs the East Africa office for McKinsey. And he has very interesting personal story. Maybe one day he can come on the podcast. But he is Iranian, but basically came to Kenya in the 70s. Soon as he was born was his parents and grew up here as a Kenyan citizen and grew up in Nakuru. And then since then, like had a wonderful career in South Africa, in other parts of Africa, and then was brought back by McKinsey to start our Nairobi office. I think just under a decade ago. So one of the very important members of the business community in Kenya also. So he was my boss, and he does a lot of work in agriculture, actually, for both Kenya and other African countries. So I went to him and said, look, maybe you need to find a new manager because I'm considering to, move on to the next thing. And as I mentioned, one of the beauties of McKinsey is even your bosses would not be so shocked if you want to leave, but everyone is very supportive of you finding your passion. So he like very sincerely asked me what it is that I'm looking for, in the next chapter of my career. So I basically shared with him the three things I mentioned. I'm like, I've thought about it. Here are the things. And he asked me, have you thought about working in agriculture? Because he actually works a lot in agriculture, but more on strategies for various governments and large organizations. But he just a man of really good values and integrity. And he really wanted to also see something built on the ground for the country that hopefully can, increase the agricultural capacity. So he gave me an idea. He said, why don't you work on agriculture company?
Yeah.
And he essentially became our first investor. And
before he became an investor, so he gives you an idea. Why don't you work on agriculture? So then how did you take that idea to the next step?
Okay. So actually, the idea has been played around in Amit's mind for a while already. He even has already found Peter, who later became my co-founder, to do the business. Because
what is the business?
The business initially is we were trying to build mid-sized farms in kind of underused land around Kenya's rural countries. So they already had their eyes on kind of farm and trying to think about what are the regions we should go to.
Yeah.
However, Peter comes from agronomy and agriculture background. We didn't really have an operator in the business. So the moment that I said I'm interested in doing something different, he's like, there it goes. You can be the operator.
Yes.
And I think one of the things I feel extremely grateful for is that the reality is, in my track record, I had not been an operator before. Actually, as soon as people know that I'm thinking of quitting, I started getting offers to do corporate strategy again, right? For large international companies, for companies like TikTok, right? Like that is very much up my alley based on my track record.
So headhunters are calling you?
Yeah. Or like my friends who have gone to work at other companies also be like, oh, you should have a conversation with our department because there is a lot of recruitment for strategy background people. But I knew in my heart, as I said, that's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to do something different. But who would have believed in me to do operations, which I want to do, but I've never done before? Since at this point in your career, people are also looking at what have you done in the past.
Indeed.
They want to pigeonhole you into those roles. So I think because my boss had worked with me closely at McKinsey, he can see even among consultants, I'm very much an executor and a doer. So they essentially also took, I think, a leap of faith on me to say, okay, she actually have the potential to become an operator. And of course, that is what I wanted to do. So I said yes.
So he introduces you. So your former boss, Amit, introduces you to your co-founder.
Yes.
So you hit it off. Tell me what was the first meeting like.
The first meeting literally happens at the farm at Muya. I've never been to even a farm in Kenya before. You see, this is what I call the journey from 30,000 feet to down to ground, essentially, right? Because at McKinsey, you are working with the politicians, you're working with the diplomats, you're working with the CEOs. The one person you're not working with is farmers, right?
Yes.
And so this is very much a new experience for me. So I remember being immediately attracted by, the difference. So from literally at that point, all of 2020, I was working on my computer from home because there's no in-person meetings. But now here I was standing on a farm and we can see that this has so much potential to be built.
And the farm is where now?
It's in Muya.
Okay.
Yes, so in Kirinyaga.
Yes.
And also, by the way, this is a side note, but I remember driving there for the first time and I saw all these rice paddies.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that Kenya was growing so much rice. I'm like, this is interesting. A bit like home, right? As Chinese people eat so much rice.
Yes.
So it's just so beautiful there. I remember being so amazed by the beauty of Mount Kenya because that's what you can see in that area. And of course, the farm is not even on a paved road, right? You have to drive off road.
Yes.
But it was just all very new and very interesting. And I remember thinking, this can be a thing that I do. But to be honest, at that point, was I sure this will be something I do for a very long time or for a while? Who knows, right? I was only given a chance to try my hands on it.
So you get into the car, drive to this, you're meeting your co-founder.
I didn't have a car. I had to be picked up, actually.
Okay. And you drive to Muya, get to the farm, because the plan here is to develop mid-sized farms to make them agriculturally productive. That's the plan.
Yes.
No funding, no nothing.
We would have plans for funding already, right? Because and this is no credit goes to me, because who was I at that point? I had no track record. I'm a 25-year-old girl, right? Yes, I've been in Kenya for a little bit, but knows nobody still at this point. But my co-founders have experience. They have track record and they have networks. So the initial sort of, we call it the angels, all come from that kind of friends and community.
So you come together, start doing the farm. How big is the farm?
The first farm we had was 30 acres.
30 acres.
Yes.
So what do you decide to grow?
We tried so many things. Actually, it's kind of a very beautiful garden. So you walk on, you find like some tomatoes, of course, some purple flowers. Those are beautiful eggplant flowers. We had a courgette, we had okra. Okra is very hard to pick, is what I learned, because it's kind of like stinging on your hand. So people hate picking okra. Then we had chilies, we had some watermelon, butternut squash.
And what was the plan? To sell it in the market? What was the plan? To just be growers or to be distributors? What was the plan?
Our initial idea, as I mentioned, is just to build good farms, because we had this sort of hypothesis, which is such a consultant speak. It's like, we think that there is obviously a lot of land available in Kenya. Much of it is underused. Even the ones that's already under farming is probably not having enough investment to even give you good yield. This is a fact. Like sub-Saharan Africa's agricultural yield.
So Marikiti, Mudhurwa, Githurai.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to how you got to know all of these markets along the way.
Yeah. And I told you earlier, I don't have a car at this point, right? I never needed a car. Who needs a car in COVID, right? You're not going anywhere. So then I had to basically find Ubers who were willing to pick me up at 3 a.m. because that's when they're in operations, right? You show up at 12 p.m., what's going on? But 3 a.m. is when people are actually coming to, like, drop off the tomato crates and have all these.
We're not Kagio.
This is Marikiti now.
So let's go slowly. So you figure out Kagio is not such a big market. So take us then, how do you then go to the next market?
So Kagio, there's no Uber in that area, as you can imagine. So I'll go with one of our staff members, right? He takes me to Kagio. I'm like, interesting. It's very big, but the price is not so competitive, right? Because it's in the heart of Kirinyaga, where everyone is growing also. So I'm thinking, well, if we want to go to bigger markets, we need to look at Nairobi. And then, of course, I ask, what is the Nairobi market? Everyone says, oh, it's, Marikiti. So then this is now I'm in Nairobi, and then I don't have a car, nor do we have any staff in Nairobi, right? At this point, everyone works on the farm. So then I think, okay, let me get an Uber driver to pick me up. And this is 3 a.m. Uber driver shows up and it's like, where are you trying to go? I'm like, I'm going to Marikiti. They're like, what is wrong with you? Why are you?
At 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why are you going there? By yourself, essentially, at this wee hours of the day. And I remember the first times I show up there, people would think that I'm maybe like a big buyer. Maybe I operate some Chinese restaurants, or, I'm there to buy. But of course, I'm just so keen on asking about how many kilos is in this crate.
So you speak to them in English or Swahili?
I think mix. A
little bit of both, because you picked up. Where did you pick up? Where did you pick up your Swahili from?
So before I started doing this company called Farmworks, right, I did take 1 month in between leaving McKinsey and starting a new job, because I thought that it's important for you to not go immediately jumping from one thing to the next, but also to reset. So I decided to spend 1 month in Zanzibar. So Stone Town is famously where Swahili is originating from. So I just found like a mwalimu, a teacher there. And I said, can you just teach me Swahili every day? So I took classes for a few weeks before I came back.
So you end up, so let's take you back to Marikiti with your 1 month worth of Swahili. You've gone alone. The Uber driver, when he drops you, does he say, do you want somebody to help you? Or he's like, yo, ciao, bye.
No. I would ask him to stay because I'm worried then by 4 a.m. nobody picks me up again, right? So I'll be like,
so he's parked outside.
Yeah, exactly.
So you walk into the market.
Actually, I had many Uber drivers. One of them is like, oh, I'm even the seller in Marikiti too. I can take you. Kenyans are hustlers. They're looking for business. So he's like, yeah, I can be a salesperson. I'm like something. So I had like a variety flavor of different Uber drivers, I think. Yeah. And some of them be like, yeah, I'm looking for a job. I can even work for a pack house. Here is like, I worked for another company before. It's so interesting. I end up, I didn't end up hiring anybody, but definitely I had many hiring conversations in my Ubers at that point.
So now you start figuring out the distribution side. Did you crack it?
I mean, I didn't crack it from the beginning because it's always a lot of trials and errors.
Yeah.
But I quickly realized, okay, here is how people are selling tomatoes, right? Essentially, farmers, if they have means, they can send their own truck. This is typically larger farmers, but many smaller farmers don't have. So then brokers would go to the shamba, go to the farm, and then come with the wooden crates, right? Just pack everything and then pay based on the crate. And then they would basically then drive it to the markets across Nairobi, of course, Marikiti being the biggest one. And then there are literally brokers in the market who act a bit as auctioneers almost. So they don't really care what is the price that day, but they charge a fixed price per crate sold. And then you have to trust them that they are giving you the best price. And that's why people say the prices are volatile, because at 3 a.m. up until like maybe 8, the prices are the highest, because this is when the fresh consignment has come in, mamas are there looking for, the best stuff. So at 3 p.m., not many people there anymore. So then they start halving the price, dropping the price to make sure that the tomatoes can still go. And this could be already a bit of the lower grades because the good ones are picked out in the morning already, right? So it's a very interesting system. And then the brokers there basically are just charging you a cut for selling the tomatoes. And I think it's also difficult for the market ladies because typically those crates, we call them turbo crates. This can be 80 kilos, 100 kilos, 120 kilos, stack up all the way, right? And it's covered in cardboard, so you really cannot see the quality inside. And how can you possibly carry that 120 kilos on your own back, right? You have to hire a motorcycle to carry back to your own kiosk, wherever it is. Maybe you have also shared with another mama, like sister of yours, to buy it together. And always there is some of the bottom, right, in the crate that gets crushed because you cannot possibly stack that much without destroying some of the quality. This is very fragile produce. So it's very, very interesting to see like how the system is, what are maybe some of the weaknesses, and where we can improve further.
And so how did that lead to Farmworks? Because first you start with the farms. Now you've become bigger. So at what point did the change happen? So now you've done your groundwork. You've figured out how the market. And how long did that take? Figuring out how these markets work.
Maybe like a month or so. Yeah.
So then take us to how you then moved away from farming into distribution.
So we didn't move away from farming yet. In fact, we were still investing. At the height, we got into 3 farms. So we didn't even just have 1 farm. We had 170 acres in total.
All in Kirinyaga?
So we have 1 in Embu and 1 in Klimambogo.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a bit more distributed.
Okay.
Because we always knew to do production, you cannot be too concentrated in one region. There is too much climate risk, so to speak, right? For one region, which totally happened to us, right? I will get to this a bit later, but like the drought of, 2023 in the beginning, and then the crazy floods, that was really, really tough for everyone.
Yes.
So if you only have 1 farm, you could lose everything. So I think from the beginning, we understood that you have to have a bit of distributed regions, right, for your production. But of course, at this point, this is still 2021, middle of the year, essentially. And we started trying to sell because once again, now I've understood the market. I have to build our own market. Otherwise, once again, the tomatoes will be sitting in a charcoal cooler without going anywhere. So I go to hiring, and actually one of my first hires actually also come from McKinsey. It's so funny, but he was not a consultant. He was actually a delivery guy for the office that we used. So when we sometimes distribute like gifts or like letters to just mails to people in the office, he would be the person that, picks it up.
Like the office messenger.
Yes.
Okay.
But he is not an employee per se. I think he's just a contractor,
That's right?
Apparently he was running a small boda delivery business, right? With a few boda guys and then delivering different things, but a very much go-getter and hustler type of person. So I'm like, okay, you are my first salesperson, right? So Peter ended up being still today one of our sales supervisors, doing really, really well. And I found him and said, okay, go find the markets, right? We probably don't want to be in Marikiti because as the largest wholesale market, it's already hyper competitive and you have to have a lot of volume. At this point, we're still small. So I think we went to City Park. Then we went to
City
Kikuyu
Park
Market.
in Parklands.
Yes,
Okay.
City Park, which I always thought City Park was in town. And then I realized City Park is not in town, right? It's
That's
in Parklands. But anyways, City Park is an interesting market because among all the kind of circles It's the only high-end one, right? Where actually foreigners would shop there, expats, restaurant owners shop there, because they also have more variety. If you go to a normal like market, for example, Wangige market, you would only find, for the most part, tomatoes, onions, dania, sukuma wiki. Like the number of crops is not so many, because the simple diet for Kenyans is not actually that complex. It's a few things. People don't really do like eggplants or okra, right? These are things that like Kenyans don't consume so much. But in City Park, you can find like eggplants, okra, because a lot of like Indians obviously shop there also, and then you find
they're vegetarian, so they want a wider variety of vegetarian.
You find Asian veg there, and then you also find like even berries, beans, like French beans, since for export, are all available in that market. So it's a bit more diverse. And
how many markets did you drive to get to all this market knowledge?
I mean, at this point, we're in many markets. So, but back in the day, I didn't even know, for example, what was Wangige or Ungon or Kitengela, right? Once again, my geographical knowledge of Nairobi, working at McKinsey, was like, oh, Lavington, Westlands, Gigiri, right? But my geographical knowledge of Nairobi and Kenya just transformed, of course, after I started doing this business. Not like I know every place. So it's very, very different. And I love this transformation. I think I get to see like a different side of the country and a much more meaningful and real side of the country also. It was less fun to only be at 30,000 feet, as I was mentioning.
So now you're on what we say, qua ground vitu ni different. You're on the ground completely.
Yes, exactly. Very much on the ground, you know, getting my hands dirty. So so we started kind of doing our first little sales in City Park, and then just like learning about basic things, but really hard to solve. For example, how do you sell there without giving credit? Like some kiosk people can be buying from you, but not wanting to pay. You have to really chase them, right? For cash payment. And then also, how can you be sure that whatever you're supplying that day actually all gets sold? What if it doesn't get sold? What do you do with that? Do you change your prices? How do you even set your prices? This is not like the stock market. You look at tickers like this is the price, right? It's not transparent at all. The price that you sell, you buy, nobody actually has one price. It's a bargaining all the time. So I think these are why it's pretty difficult to operate in the local market, and why not many companies have been very successful in creating systems and skill, right? Because there's so much nitty-gritties you have to figure out.
Okay. So now you've moved. We've got the farm. We've now figured out the markets. How did you scale? To Embu, to Kilimambogo? How did you scale the business?
One of the key ingredients to scaling is actually, as I mentioned, kind of figuring out the insights that nobody really paid attention to. So once again, I think because I took the 3 a.m. Ubers to Marikiti, I got to actually know, right, what the market ladies were looking for and what is their current way of buying these things. And I quickly realized that one of the key things they're looking for, that's even before price, is consistency. One of the biggest pain points of the customers is that we have pretty bad supply chains of most things. You know, even if you shop in a Carrefour, one product can be available today and is missing from the shelf tomorrow.
100%.
And this even applies to the simple things like tomatoes and onions, right? And for our customers who are the kiosk ladies, the market ladies, like maybe one day I'm able to get some supply in my local market because some broker has come in with a Pro Box. But maybe tomorrow they're not there. Okay, but tomorrow I've run out. So I have to go then all the way to Marikiti. Or maybe like one day I know there is a farmer somewhere, then I go all the way to the Shamba to pick up, right? So for them to figure out their supply chain is also difficult. So everyone is trying to figure out how am I able to get a good supply every day? Kila siku, right? Without fail. And that's actually what we came into the market to solve is how can we be a good supplier to them every single day? Yes, I may not have the perfect quality or the best price every single day, but at least I'm there. I think that's actually a huge game changer for a lot of our customers to just make them feel like, Farmworks is here every day to give us something. And then, of course, they move on to how do we do quality control. So thanks to my co-founder and a lot of our staff who already come from the Kenyan horticulture industry. Kenya is a country blessed with high-end horticulture. We do flower exports.
Yeah.
We do a lot of high-end, salad packing. So there are a lot of experienced professionals who understand the quality for export. But nobody ever bothered to bring the same amount of quality for domestic.
That's right.
And that's actually what we try to do is, well, for export, you would be packing for each customer, right? Understanding their specs. Why are we not doing the same for domestic? So actually we did that. So we understand, for example, here is the spec for a market lady in Kikuyu market. Kikuyu is a middle class community. They actually want larger tomatoes. They don't care for the smaller ones because many people there actually have a bit more income. But maybe you are now just a few kilometers away, you are in a Gitaru. Now, people there have a bit less income. They don't want the large tomatoes. They want smaller sizes. And we get to understand a lot of these nuances. Similarly, we would pack for like a zucchini.
Yeah.
We pack for a quick mart, right? And they have their own standards for maybe less ripe tomatoes so that in the supermarket, they can have a longer shelf life.
But how did you get there? So we've got you we left at Kirinyaga, the Kirinyaga farm. So how did you move from farming to now realizing you need to become an aggregator?
Yeah, exactly.
So how did you become an aggregator?
Yeah.
Because now you've done all your market research. You've seen that there's a significant amount of differentials in different markets, the way they want. So there's, as you said, it's nuanced. There's granular requirements. How did you get there?
As we were establishing ourselves as a serious supplier in the local market, we quickly realized that it's a good problem to have. Demand is going so much faster than supply because many more markets wanted us. Market ladies want to be able to buy more consistently.
What do they like about you?
Us. Number one is consistency, right?
Okay.
I am trying to be there every day, at least. But of course, if I'm not harvesting every day, how can I possibly be supplying every day? So that's what drove us to expand our farming footprint first. Then I realized, wait a minute, opening farm is a slow process.
Yeah.
We need to put in a lot of money. We need to do land prepping. We need to build up dams and all kinds of things. It can never be as fast as opening a new market to supply more tomatoes. And at that point, we thought, look, we are already in the heart of all of these farming countries, right? In Kirinyaga, in Embu, and there are so many other farmers near us. Why are we not also working with them? And, by doing so, also supporting the community. So that's when we started buying from the farmers and working with them.
So now you have to get local staff to go and talk to them because they want to see local people. Or how does it work?
Yeah, of course. I mean, by the way, for this whole period, I was the only foreigner in the whole company, right? Okay. So of course, there's always local staff. I cannot be in 100 places myself. And I'm very grateful for that. I think our staff is extremely committed and capable and works really, really hard because farming is not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah.
You cannot take a day off and or holiday because the plants are not waiting for you.
Right.
So farmers are always very hardworking people, really. So what happens then is we also iterated for many approaches, how to work with farmers, right? How can you actually work with them in such a way that benefits them, but also benefits us?
Yeah.
For example, initially we try to be like, can we sign contracts with farmers to buy tomatoes? That was very, very hard. Tomatoes price, as I mentioned, even in Marikiti, changes from morning to evening, right? And it's not transparent. Different brokers are coming, giving different prices every day. Different farmers can tell you different prices. So imagine you try to agree on 40. Come the day, the price is 50. Oh, in this case, it will sell somewhere else. And or if come the day, the price is 30, they can buy from their neighbors and give it to you.
That's
you see?
right.
So it was almost impossible to do these contracts and agree on prices. That's one. Number two is quality issues, right? How can we help the farmers see here are the specs that we want? And as we were doing this, we also worked very hard on expanding our channels so we can be more able to take all sorts of grades, right? Once again, we have the high-end supermarkets. They want the beautiful, like G1. But we also have all the mass markets, right? Which can take smaller ones. Now we even supply to certain like tomato paste processors, in which case they don't really care about the sizes.
And who's setting the grades? Is it you? Is that
we
your
set
standards?
the grades, yeah.
Okay.
So the grades took us a year to figure out because once again, you talk to different people. There is no simple grade system, right? Yeah. Once again, this is not like export. People have not done this in the local market. So we started setting grades. We're like, okay, there are 5 sizes and then 2 ripeness. And we also separate spots and spotless. So this took a long time for us to establish, train our own staff, and then even let our customers and like suppliers understand.
And so we started in 2021. We're now at 2024. How many farmers do you have now as outgrowers within your supply chain?
Yeah, so we have quite a number. Let me kind of like give a high level separation between what we're doing now, right? Because we were really still in 2021 time. So what happened in then the last 3 years is our go-to market in the local domestic market is increasing really quickly. Today, we're selling close to 1,000 tons every month, making us one of the largest local distributors of fresh produce, covering all the major markets in the greater Nairobi area.
Yeah.
But we're also now a bit into the Western markets and still kind of expanding our geographical footprint. So just on these local produce like tomatoes, onions, which are our main things, we are working with a few thousand farmers, initially only in Kirinyaga, because that's where we came from. But then we quickly realized, okay, throughout the year, Kenya has other regions that's producing very well. You can be in Oleitok, you can be in Rumuruti, you can be in Narok, right? Like all kinds of different regions. So now we actually have boots on the ground for different regions to be working with farmers. So that you can have
consistent supply the whole year round.
For most of these domestic crops, as I mentioned, we realized that we cannot really do contract price because it doesn't work. So we have to basically create our own pricing system and then do a daily price with the farmers. But we are a very consistent buyer. So they do know, well, so long as I am going with the market price, if farmers come to pick today, in the next harvest after 3 days would still be coming back.
And so your prices now are dynamic based on your supply because now you've got multiple supply sources. Does this still mean a better price for the woman at the market, for Mama Mboga?
Yeah, so what we do then is we also do dynamic pricing for our market, right? Pricing is really difficult for the local market, as I mentioned, because it seems to be very volatile. So you really have to figure out what's a fair price on a daily basis. So we collect data on a daily basis of volume sold, of stock levels at all of our different branches in pack house, and what is projection. And we take all of those factors into consideration, including also like maybe competition price in the market to set the price for the next day. Yeah. And then we take such feedback again. So this is quite painstaking to do actually, because we want to be as data driven as possible in us setting the prices. And for the market ladies then, they get to know our price basically on the day. Sometimes the price can be stable for a week or even longer, but sometimes they can actually change. So one of the key things of working as sort of a key player in the value chain of agriculture is you have to be very in tune with the market.
And you're managing two stakeholders. There's the supply side. Okay, so probably the price of growing tomatoes in Oloitoktok might be more than the price of growing tomatoes in Rumuruti. And then there's the buy side. And you're trying to manage all. And then there's your business costs in between, your distribution, your sale and distribution costs. So I guess it has to be a very data-driven business.
Yes. And that's how we are trying to differentiate ourselves in the market, because we are not a single broker who is taking a pro box going from point A to B. And then all that I need to make is the fuel money, right? Yeah. Then I consider myself profitable already. We do have more business cost. So the only way for us to play a role in actually helping the supply chain of tomatoes and onions is by us, number one, achieving a big scale. Because without scale, you are nobody.
What does scale look like to you?
Scale look like today, we're already bigger than obviously 3 years ago.
So today you're at 1,000 tons a month.
Yes, and it's not enough. I think at 1,000 tons, think about how much Kenyans are actually consuming. Because we're not doing, once again, we give up on the eggplant and okra and all the small SKUs, because we realize that the role we need to play is to help stabilizing the staple food crops, right? It's very nice to do eggplant, but by saturating the entire market, I'm selling 2 tons a week, right? At the end of the day. So it's actually not the battle that we should be picking up as a company. As aggregator, because there are not so many farmers growing it at the end of the day, and there are not so many consumers at the end of the day. So we want to actually be playing a critical role in the staple food crops. So that's why we chose.
The staples are the tomatoes.
Yes, the onions, maybe potatoes.
Sukuma.
Sukuma we haven't done yet, because that's another thing I've learned is, of course, I would love to be able to solve everything all at once, but we also need to be very focused. As I mentioned, even just creating the grading system for like tomatoes took us a very long time. And every time you're introducing a new crop, we have to train logistics people on how to handle it. We have to train graders on how to grade it. And then we have to come up with new system. And so that means I just cannot be dealing with too many things at once. I would rather be like, let's really become proficient and good at dealing one thing, right? Tomato, we're not known as the market's best supplier pretty much to anyone.
So what are they? Because the people watching will definitely want to know, okay, fine. So now we're having a big buyer, a consistent buyer. What should I, because Kenyans are hustlers.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a little patch of garden at the back. You know, you've got a little farm, you know, a 50 by 100 somewhere that's next to good water. So what are the 5 main, are they 5? Are they 4?
No. Right now we're big in tomato, onion, and potatoes. So if
tomato,
you do
onion, and potatoes.
Yes.
And are you getting consistent supply? So do you integrate backwards, which is help the farmers get the good seed?
So not yet, but this is definitely where we want to go next.
Okay.
So I paused a little bit on actually our channels. So as mentioned, we then build our domestic. And then we started finding farmers everywhere. We kind of create a bit of seasonal regional mapping to know where to source from in different times, right? So indeed, there will be times when only Tok Tok is better than Rumuruti. That can be a certain season. Then there is good season for Rumuruti or other areas also.
And do you want your farmers to be sort of concentrated in one place? It makes your collection easier, or do you have a central collection point?
For the local farmers, we always go pick at a farm. For the most part, unless you really have the ability to deliver, which will pay you for delivery. But most farmers seem to prefer if we just go to the farm to pick, which we do. That means we have some minimum collection volume, right? If you have 100 kilos, we cannot come to your shamba to pick because that's too little. You have to have a few tons. But it's not that much because if you do 1 acre of tomatoes, you should be able to get a harvest of 20 tons already.
1 acre of tomatoes, 20 tons.
Yeah. Wow. That's Kenya's yield. And once again, for South Africa, with more developed agriculture, they can do 40 tons.
What are they doing more? Is it that the fertilizer is better? They're more mechanized?
More fertilizer, more mechanized, more irrigation for sure. Better drip irrigation systems, etc. More professional management of farms also. There is still a big gap in terms of productivity potential, right? Which is the problem we want to work on further. As we kind of get to the solving the problem first, let's find a market access, right, for everyone. Right. That is number 1. Let's make the offtake more consistent. Let's make the supply more consistent. I think that's a role that we started to play now. But then to your point, can we go more upstream to actually help them find better seedlings, the correct varieties.
And provide agricultural extension services, which is somebody coming to the farm and telling them what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, totally. So we actually do that today because from about 18 months ago, we started doing our export business also. Because export actually is a very well-established sector in Kenya. As I mentioned, we have a lot of really amazing exporters who have been in the country for decades and then have very much established mature market connections to the UK, to Europe, to some of the best retailers in the world. So that's actually great. And what we want to do is we want to tap into the expertise of export sector and then to borrow some of that knowledge, then back into domestic farmers. So today we're also working back to contract farming because as it's not possible to agree on price for tomatoes, it is possible to agree for French beans because people are not just walking the street to sell to their neighbors, right? That's people don't really consume that. So typically you can agree on a price range or like high season price, low season price, for example. And what we do for export farmers, which is also legally required, we have to provide seeds. We have to provide chemicals. We have to give agronomic monitoring and advice. We have to scout them on a weekly basis to know what is happening.
But why do you want to go into the export market when you say that the domestic market is still largely untapped?
Yes.
In terms of a quality perspective?
Because for me, doing export is strategic for 2 reasons. Number 1 is it does earn us hard currency. You know, last year, Kenyan shilling situation was so volatile.
Yeah.
So anyone who is not earning some hard currency can be hit quite bad in this market. So it's nice for us to be able to say like, at least we have some business that's earning tons, right? That is helpful to the business kind of overall financial health. But then number 2 is also it's strategic in the way that we are forced to adhere to higher standards in export, like this traceability level. And I just take some part of that, right, into domestic. And then we can already be better and like more higher standards than a lot of the local players. So once again, we already do the seeds provision and input financing and all of those services, extension services for our export farmers.
Which product are you export farmers
We do French
doing?
beans for the most part, and we do some peas and snaps also. Yeah. And once we do that, I'm actually now taking the lessons learned here and be like, can I offer some of that for local farmers? The reason that we haven't done that, we actually tried it. Then we realized there's no way we can make it profitable. Because for export, your margin is a bit better. For domestic, we're razor-thin margin. Like, I'd be thankful if I make 1 shilling. So then how can I spend that 1 shilling on building capacity and extension services until we have capacity trend and processes well matured, right, from export market already? I think now we're starting to get into the level where we're like, we've kind of cracked the process and understood how to do this with minimum cost, but in an effective way, right? For export farmers, now we can take some of that, promote it to our domestic farmers.
How many farmers now do you have?
So now we have 3,000 farmers.
3,000 farmers in all these areas you've mentioned across Kenya.
Yes. I think in total working farmers we work with is actually a higher number than that. But of course, not all farmers are always active because they go into planting, they go into not planting. And one of the things I really want to do is I want to shy away from the idea it's like the more the merrier. Because a lot of the NGOs will be like, and we work with 1 million farmers or whatever. And I used to think the number is so important. But nowadays I try to think, but what about the quality of that farmer?
That's right.
I would much rather work with a smaller number, but have some proven impact on actually increasing their income in a significant manner, actually making their soil conditions better by promoting better farming practices, making them more sustainable than just having more farmers onboarded, but then not actually helping them in any meaningful manner. So one of our core strategies for the upcoming, I would say, year and two is to start tracking much better some of the benchmark numbers. So being data driven once again to understand when the farmer has come to us, what was their condition? And then of course we already have their income, right? Because we're their income for the most part. We already have their yield because we buy. And then we already have their quality data because we grade, right? So all of those we actually have. But how can we use them in a way that actually drive even better outcome per farmer? Because I would even argue that I don't want to work with every farmer. I only want to work with every good farmer. So that means we also evaluate the farmers in our system, and we want to create a bit of a graduation system where some of you maybe actually is not doing very well for your own reasons. Maybe we don't work with you next season. We're very selective. But then if you are doing well, you are committed, we shall be able to give you even more support. So we kind of allow you to level up. Once again, this is not yet what we're doing, but it's definitely in my mind to create.
Where you want to go. So we started off with 1 farm to 2 farms to 3 farms to now 3,000 farmers. What will make you die happy? I don't like using that word, but what will make you say, you know what, I've made a big difference in terms of the farming? Because, you know, we go back to the 3 things. You know, they say mambo ni matatu. You said you had your big 3 things that you said, I'm leaving McKinsey. I've got to make an impact. Yeah. What is impact for you looking like? And I appreciate what you just said, that impact is not necessarily X number of farmers, but how we can be able to improve the yield and by improving the yield, improve their quality of life, and therefore impact a community in a very big way. So what does Farmworks look like in its big, hairy, audacious goal?
Totally. I love the BHAG.
Yes.
So I think that there are actually also 3 things. Mambo ni tatu always.
Exactly.
So first of all is, I think one of the ways to measure our sustainability is, can this business last for 100 years? I actually, once again, I never really worked in agriculture before, but now I love agriculture. I look at some of the world's oldest companies. What are they in? They're in agriculture, right? Internet businesses and tech, they have only been coming out in the recent decades. So none of them have even been that old.
Yeah.
But if you look at the world's most successful agriculture companies, often century old, because in farming, in ag, the longer you're in it, also like the more truly wealth of knowledge you're accumulating, and there is nothing that actually beats time. in the sector. Very interestingly, because in internet and tech, you can have something that suddenly overtook, right, the last thing, and then you can just die. But for agriculture, it doesn't work that dramatically.
Yeah.
A lot of the sweat and time you're spending in it is so worth it. So I just think it also, working in this sector has given me so much more appreciation for patience, for commitment and hardworkiness that maybe in financial services or in technology, I don't necessarily see the same level.
Yeah.
So number one is I want to build a business that can last for a century or longer, because I think it's actually possible to do so in agriculture.
How important was having a local partner key to the success of this? Because like you said, you just been in Kenya 3 years, still new, had to learn the networks. How important was having a local partner?
I think it's extremely important, right? I don't even think we're successful yet, but I would say whatever accomplishment we have so far, I owe it to our partners, my partners, my co-founders, because once again, what did I know? I could take all the Uber rides in the world I want, but I wouldn't have the same knowledge and exposure back in the day, especially even getting that audacity to get into the business, right? So I think it's hugely important, and I'm just so grateful for both my co-founders and also our local staff, because we now employ almost 400 people, all local. So we continue just to be really grateful for the commitment from our
400 staff members.
Yes,
that's a lot of lives.
We're labor intensive.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Now let's move a little bit to Malaika Kitchens. What's Malaika Kitchens? How did that get started?
Malaika Kitchens is a kitchen building program. So we started 2 years ago, and currently we're only in Kirinyaga. But what we do is we go to the local primary schools. Many of them don't really have much resources, to be honest. And we realize that many of the kids going to school actually would go on to classes starving because there is no meal provided for them. But we quickly realized that one of the resource constraints is not space. In these rural schools, unlike in the urban schools, they actually often have very large plots of land, but they don't actually have any money to build even a proper kitchen to create meals. The best we could see is a tiny kitchen, maybe only the teachers are allowed to use to make their lunch. So Malaika Kitchens actually funds 100% the kitchen construction for each of the school. So this is the money we basically raise for. We have a budget of building a modern kitchen for the school. And then what we do is we recruit 1 to 2 cooks, typically always from the parents and from the community. So they're the ones who will be able to prepare the foods. And we link them up with good suppliers of maize, beans. We would give some of our own vegetables also. In this case, they make a very simple meal plan, essentially, but at least now they can be able to have meals prepared every day. We charge the parents to pay for the meals, but we do so in a way that is already minimizing the cost of the meal. So the average cost of our meal is between 20 to 25 shillings per meal. This is not so bad. In comparison, if you're even trying to buy a samosa, it could be 50 shillings. So parents can typically pay per week. So that means you're paying 100 shillings per week to cover all of your kids' meals.
And how many kitchens do you have?
We now are in 9 schools and actually serving meals to 7,000 kids every day.
7,000 kids.
Yes.
And is there an opportunity to partner with, let's say, the local county government to subsidize the cost of the meals to the children? Is that an option for you?
I think so. So once again, I want to make sure that we have refined our own approach, because honestly, this is also not just all roses, right? We had schools opening and then they had to shut down because of maybe the parents can no longer pay for it, right? Or maybe we don't have yet a perfect payment collection system. So maybe the funds are given, but then one missing, right? Yes. And then there are also situations where some parents want to do it, some parents don't want to do it. Then how can we reconcile the differences, etc.? Right. So we're still very much in the process of harmonizing our operating systems so that we're able to create something that is sustainable for all of the schools. And the beginning days of Malaika Kitchens, this program actually was only run by a few of our interns, just very motivated young people who were interning at Farmworks, Marius, Anastasia, Brooke. And these kids actually literally drove the beginning of the program. This is back in 2022. But from a year ago, we now have a full-time local team to run this program and push it forward. So we have a director, we have administrator, we have now accountant and a driver. It's a small team, like 4 or 5 people, I think. But they were able to, increase our number of schools from just 2, 3 to now 9. And they're able to kind of harmonize a lot of the processes, which of course we're still working on perfecting. And we also finally launched our website. So if anyone is interested, feel free to just Google Malaika Kitchens. And now we have a website where you can even donate some small money, and it's equivalent to, a kitchen or something like that, right? So this is just an example of community building initiative we have. Once again, identify opportunity only because we're there, right? You can never imagine about it, is what I realized. You really have to go there to visit, to see with your own eyes, to know actually the opportunity, because we thought maybe it's providing meals, but we realized actually it's building kitchens. And that is wonderful. And I'm so excited about the future of this program.
4 years in Kenya, and you've done so much, Shili. Your Mambo ni Matatu have actually come to bear. And I'm sure you're super proud. So as we bring this podcast to an end, this has just been absolutely fascinating. I want to do a quick fire, and this is something we want to be doing for all our podcast guests. Just 3 quick fire questions, because we love Kenya. We are born in Kenya. We love it. And we always want to know how people experience Kenya, different people. So first question, what's your top food destination in Kenya? Where do you like to go to eat when you're here?
Nairobi actually has really amazing Chinese cuisine. And I was very lucky to find that out because I don't cook so much. So whenever I feel homesick, there is one Chinese restaurant that I love. It's called Enjoy Yuan. It's on Village Road next to the US Embassy in Gigiri, actually. And it's very low-key. It's kind of in a house, like many restaurants are here. If you look it up on Google Maps, it's on 120 Village Road. It's actually the best Chinese food you can get.
What's the best thing we should order when we get there?
There's so many. They have a really good English menu. Some Chinese restaurants don't do a good job with their English menu, but they actually have a really, really good menu. So you can just, ask even the waitresses there. They will sort you out.
Excellent. All right. So what is your top ground local Kenyan experience? Like when you want to just have a good local sound of the river, what does a wananchi feel? What does a wananchi want? Where do you go?
We're so local. So literally, even yesterday, I was in Kangami Market. So my go-to thing is always do market visits. Because we started in only 1 or 2 places. Now we have almost 30 locations all over the country. That means we're covering a lot of the major farmers markets. So what I do is I would often, without telling our people that I'm going, but I will show up and just chat with the customers and know, what is their feedback on Farmworks. And that's very wonderful because you really see the liveliness of this, country and of the people in those markets.
Absolutely.
There's music, there's loud noises, bright colors, women wearing the crates on their head, which is always so wonderful. I'm like, wow, how did you balance this? It's crazy, right? You can carry 20 kilos of tomatoes on your head and walk. But yeah, that's what I love to do the most.
Excellent. And the last one, which is your top I need to get away from everybody destination when you just want to kick off your shoes and just lay back?
My favorite place to go, which funnily enough, you actually mentioned it in the opening, I love to go to Watamu.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Where in Watamu?
Treehouse is typically the place. And that's actually where we met for the first time also, right? It's in Watamu. So Treehouse, which is owned by a good friend, Paul, it's just such a wonderful place. They offer retreats for yoga. They offer a lot of meditation. And it's mostly food that's very fresh from the local community. They mostly are vegetarian. And where you go there, you can truly kind of detox and just feel like there is a very calming, spirit when you go there. So I highly recommend. But it's really, really popular, hard to book. So you have to inquire in advance.
So Lee has helped us pop our cherry, as it were, in terms of podcasts. And what a person, what a story. And please sign up and join and follow us and like and subscribe. And we can assure you're going to see a lot of more interesting stories about interesting people doing interesting things. This is Carol Musyoka signing off from our first Nitpicker podcast. Thank you.